Tiger fans, you're now tuned in to Tiger Rag Television, your source for the latest in LSU sports, in-depth game analysis, engaging interviews, and all things Tiger Nation. It's time to talk some LSU sports. Let's get ready for your Tiger Rag hosts, Jim Inkster, Chelsea Brumfield, Jeff Palermo, James Moran, and Tyler Nunez.
Welcome to Tiger Rag Television. I'm Chelsea Brumfield, and you are in for a treat tonight. Now, you may know the name Tiger Rag from magazine or even local sports radio, but you've never seen us like this. We will be here before and after Coach O's show on Wednesday nights, giving you everything you need to know about college sports, LSU, and everything in between. Today, I'm joined with Jim Inkster, president of Tiger Rag TV, to open up our inaugural show. Jim, how are you?
I'm doing well, Chelsea. It's good to be with you. Class of 2014.
2014, yes.
And I'm class of 1981. But one thing we have in common is that Tiger Rag was around before we were. 1978 was the genesis of Tiger Rag. It's been around for 41 years, and we're covering LSU today, but we'll go back in time in our interview segment in just a bit with Alan Risher, who's almost as old as I am, and he's got quite a story to tell. He and Coach O were freshmen together at LSU in 1979, and Alan Risher, of course, is one of the great quarterbacks in the history of Tiger Town. He has some thoughts about the current guy, Heisman Trophy candidate Joe Burrow.
And coming up on the show, Glenn Guilbeau, USA Today writer and feature columnist for Tiger Rag magazine, is joining us in today's Crossfire. The topic, do college athletes deserve to be paid? Jim, you're going to be joining this Crossfire debate, and what do you think?
I am, and I think athletes should be paid, but Guilbeau, he says no way. I think he's off his rocker. We'll find out why in just a few moments.
Stick around.
Hey everybody, this is Troy Lander. I'm standing here with my good friend Joey Dolman. We had the newest car dealership in the greater Baton Rouge area. This is AJ Dolman, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram. Come see my good friend at AJ Dolman in Plaquemine, and when you do, tell them Shoot 'em sent you.
Looking for fun in Baton Rouge? At Celebrity Theaters, you will experience the highest quality of family entertainment in the Baton Rouge area. Come experience luxury recliner seating in 10 auditoriums, including the 2 premium large format auditoriums with Dolby Atmos sound for every huge movie release. Plus, enjoy a full arcade. Celebrity Theaters is located at 15365 George O'Neill Road in Baton Rouge, with locations in Broussard and Ruston, Louisiana. Tickets can be purchased in advance, and your next event can be scheduled at celebritytheaters.com. Come join us at Celebrity Theaters for family fun and create lifelong memories.
Welcome back to Tiger Rag Television, and this week's Crossfire. California has passed legislation making it legal for college athletes to get endorsements in 2023. It begs the question, do players like Joe Burrow deserve compensation as well while wearing an LSU jersey? Glenn Guilbeau and Jim Inkster joined us in studio a few days ago to discuss this, and trust me, it was one for the books.
Well, I like that part of it. I don't think all football players should be paid, but if you can limit it to the ones who would get those endorsements, it's not going to be a lot of players. And I like the fact that players can be paid for their likeness on a T-shirt or something like that. That makes sense, because that would be capitalism. The top players would be the only ones that would get the money, and because it's just not practical to say all football players or all basketball players should be paid. That possibly could work. I really don't like it though, because those players, in a couple of years, they're going to get paid anyway, you know, and barring injury, and that's rare.
Not all of them. Sometimes they're great college players who are flops in the pros, but you're moving in the right direction. That University of Missouri education is getting you in the right direction here. These players should be paid, Glenn, and Joe Burrow, he should be making 7 figures. There's no doubt that he's as important to this team as the coach or anybody else on the LSU team, so why not pay him accordingly? This guy is the real deal. He should be making $1 million or more as the quarterback for the Fighting Tigers.
I don't see it that way, because you know, he's part of something that's been around for a long time, and if it wasn't him, they'd have somebody else who was a quarterback. Wouldn't be as good, and he's going to get paid. And even the pro players that flop, they still make a lot of money. Jamarcus Russell made a lot of money, and he was a flop. And actually college players are paid now. For the last several years, they've been getting cost of tuition. Leonard Fournette was paid, it's about $1,000 a semester. They have limitless food and snacks now. That old joke about, oh, I can't afford a pizza and a Coke, that's gone. Plus, they get the best medical care while they're at a school like LSU. They also get the best legal care when they get arrested or something. A normal guy gets arrested, they can't afford the legal teams that these LSU athletes often have. They have a great job fair. It's called the NFL Combine, if they're invited to it, or Pro Day at LSU. There's lots of advantages, and their education is free. That's money. You ask anybody who pays tuition for a 4-year college. So I think they're getting plenty of compensation. And even if you don't play on the LSU football team, if you're known as a guy that was on the team and you're on the team for 4 years, that's going to help you get a job. And let's say you're a football player and you play poorly. You're a big recruit and you play poorly through your 4 years. Should you owe LSU money? I mean, if you're going to pay Burrow money, then the bad players should owe money. Well, I can think of some LSU quarterbacks who should pay back LSU.
Way too far, because you just never know. Do coaches pay back LSU when they lose? No,
some of them should.
They're paid not to coach. And here we are. You mentioned Jamarcus Russell. He was the first player taken in the NFL draft. Naturally, he's going to make lots of money. But what about the guys who aren't the first players taken? These shoes, for example, the players should be the ones controlling the shoe contracts, not the coaches, not the administration. It's the players who are wearing those shoes. They're the ones who are on national television. They're the ones who should be compensated. Why do the coaches get money for the hard work of their players while they're standing on the sidelines and are very unlikely to be hit by a 300-pound lineman?
Well, they were players. Most of them were players, and they didn't get paid. So, I mean, it's just part of getting older.
We got a coach at LSU who couldn't cut it at LSU. So
but he did play.
These guys he did play. He played very well at Northwestern State. But these guys they're a cut above most of the players, most of the coaches that are getting the big money.
Well, but they could. It's just. I just don't like the idea of paying people a lot of money who are going to make it in 2 years anyway, for the most part. And if they don't make it in the NFL, they can play in Canada, or they could play in the Arena League, or they can become a coach. I mean, they have advantages. Even though they're not playing in the NFL and weren't paid, they have advantages to help their earning status because they played football without a paycheck. But something could be done with some of the huge contracts like Coach K has at Duke. Maybe something could be taken by law. Something could be taken out of those shoe and TV contracts and put back into the school. Well, maybe not directly to a player, but in general.
Nick Saban, a man you know well, he even has his house paid for at Alabama. Now, he's a guy who produces. I can see why he deserves every dollar he makes. He's a bargain. But some of these coaches, Curly Hallman was no bargain when he went 16-28 in 4 years here. But Chelsea in her open made a good point, because this is something that's new terrain. It's going to be challenged in the courts, and it doesn't happen until 2023.
If it does happen. And, a couple of years ago, some Northwestern State players tried to form a labor union, and it was a big story for a couple of days. But all those guys left college and got their own jobs. It's like kind of being in student council in college. It doesn't last. You're going to do something else. And it sounds good right now, but and it's a hot story because the media, it's kind of a cool topic. Oh, pay the players. But I think it's not practical, and I'll be surprised if the California law goes national as it is.
I think the law may very well be passed, but what will happen, the state of Louisiana is not going to allow California to have an unfair recruiting advantage over LSU. Louisiana and other states will follow suit, and it'll be the law of the land. And it'll be a step forward because these athletes deserve to be paid. You are right that it's going to be primarily the big names who get the compensation, which could create some internal problems, but at least it's a step in the right direction.
And there's been other steps in the right direction with the cost of tuition. But, I don't think that would be a bad thing if the key players like the Joe Burrows and the Tua at Alabama, if they started getting money from their likeness and shirts and so forth, because they're already the stars. You know, if there's going to be all this ill will among their teammates, it would already be there. I mean, Joe Burrow is the star of the LSU team, whether he's getting paid or not. But that always happens in athletics, and players can deal with that. I mean, players like Drew Brees, he's obviously the star. So that's not going to happen, I don't think. That's not going to be a problem, I should say.
Well, Burrow has said that his jersey is being sold, and he'd like to get a piece of the action. At least he's honest about it. And it's a step in the right direction. Let's see what happens, but I think this is a sign of the times.
Sure.
The coaches in our day, they didn't even make $100,000 to be the head coach. Now that's changed a lot. We've got coaches making close to $10 million, 8 figures. Something has to give.
Thanks, Jim and Glenn. Coming up on the rest of the show, the Tiger Rag six-pack. You don't want to miss it. Stick around right after this break.
Welcome back to Tiger Rag Television. I'm Jeff Palermo, News and Sports Director of the Louisiana Radio Network. It's now time for the Tiger Rag Weekly Six-Pack. 6 rapid-fire questions regarding LSU football, college football, the SEC. And here to answer them, Tiger Rag editor James Moran and assistant editor Tyler Nunez. Here's question number 1. Ed Orgeron has been the head coach for the LSU Tigers since 2016. During that time, LSU has 7 victories against AP top 10 teams. That's the 3rd most in college football. Does that make Coach Ed Orgeron one of the best coaches in college football?
I think so, Jeff. I mean, you're talking about maybe one of the 10 best coaches based on the resume he's compiled at LSU. I mean, coming off a 10-win season, they look like they're well on their way to another one this year, considering they're off to the 6-0 start. I mean, they've brought in a great staff, a big-time recruiting class, has another one on the way. If you don't think he's a top 10 coach, you're probably just still have it stuck in your head how bad of a coach he was at Ole Miss. And don't get me wrong, he was a disaster there. It was as disastrous a tenure as we've ever seen from any college coach. But if you look at the coach he's now kind of become and learn from those mistakes, I do think you at least got to give him credit as one of the 10 best out there, because once you get past Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney, Jimbo Fisher, there's just not a lot of championship coaches out there, and Ed Orgeron, at least right now, is knocking on the door of joining that group.
Yeah, it's not every day we call a 58-year-old head coach up and coming, but that's really what we have in Ed Orgeron. His ability to kind of fix his past mistakes and correct himself is second to none, really, across the country. So I think you absolutely have to put him on that list of top coaches in the country right now. Just what the resume he's been able to accumulate here at LSU is second to none.
Question number 2 for you guys. LSU is ranked number 2 in the AP Top 25 poll. Give me an argument on why LSU shouldn't be the top-ranked team right now.
Why they shouldn't be, it's kind of hard because they've got the resume. The only thing that's really holding them back is previous year's performances. It's really tough to jump teams in the AP Top 25 when you have 2 teams like Alabama and Clemson who were in the national championship game last year. They're still undefeated. It's just really hard to kind of jump teams like that. It's hard to convince the voters that you deserve a spot above them.
Yeah, the weird thing is I don't really see how they can be ranked 2. I mean, I think you could put them number 1 if you want to go straight off resume, who they've beaten, how convincingly they've beaten a couple of really good ranked teams. Or if you want to go off of style points, I don't think they would be second. I think they'd be behind Ohio State. You'd probably say behind Alabama just because they haven't had any close calls. But 2 seems actually kind of like a weird spot for them. But obviously it does build the drama, the tension, all that stuff for November 9th and playing Alabama in a one possible, if both teams get there undefeated, 1 versus 2 game.
Question number 3 for the Tiger Rag Weekly Six-Pack. Joe Burrow has a completion percentage near 80%. Will he finish with a completion percentage above 75% when the season ends?
I don't see any reason why not. I mean, just doing the math, he'd have to be below 70 for the rest of the year probably to drag his stats down that far. You look down the schedule, they got a Mississippi State team this week that struggled really. They've got Alabama and Auburn are tough defenses, or at least Auburn is for sure. Alabama we think is based on reputation, but then they got Ole Miss, they got Arkansas, they got Texas A&M. There's some really bad defenses still on the schedule, and I don't see him incompleting enough passes to drop the numbers that low.
Yeah, I was a firm believer that this number would drop throughout the season, especially as they got into the meat of the SEC play, but after a performance like that against Florida, one of the top defenses in the country coming into that game, it's really hard to imagine what defense is going to stop him. I still think it's going to be difficult. I think he's going to have a game or two where they're going to have to win despite him having a poorer than usual performance. But right now it's hard to say it'll dip under 75% whenever he just dropped 21 of 24 against Florida.
All right, question number 4 for the Tiger Rag Weekly Six-Pack. You have 7 schools, 7 Power 5 schools that are undefeated at this point. Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, and Penn State. Out of those 7 schools, which 3 are going to be left out of the college football playoff in your mind?
Ooh, that's a really tough one. Let's see.
I'll give you a little help. I'll give you a little help. Ohio State hosts both Wisconsin and Penn State this season. So there's going to be a couple teams knocked out there. And, of course, you got Alabama playing LSU coming up November 9th.
Yeah, so I got to say, I do think that Wisconsin and Penn State, right now I got to give the edge to Ohio State against those 2 teams. That said, I think Wisconsin has a phenomenal defense that's going to give Ohio State some trouble. I just think Ohio State is a more complete football team. An SEC team is probably going to get left out there. Right now I'm going to say LSU because Alabama has just given them such trouble over the last 8 years. Right now I'm going to stick with Alabama, but don't be surprised if LSU comes in with a shocker here.
Yeah, the LSU-Alabama loser is going to need some help if they're going to be one of the 4 teams that get in. They probably would need all 3 of those Big Ten teams to lose or Oklahoma to lose, though it seems like Oklahoma probably has the easiest roadmap of the teams we talked about just because aside from a possible rematch with Texas in the Big 12 championship game, I just don't see a lot of teams that could beat them. Clemson, they probably don't play anybody that's anywhere close to being able to beat them, so you'd think it's the Alabama-LSU winner. You'd think it's Clemson. You'd think it's Oklahoma, one Big Ten team. It doesn't seem to me like a year where 2 SEC teams are getting in, and I don't think there's any real chance both or all 3 Big Ten teams get in or anything like that.
Well, if you have all 3 Big Ten teams lose and LSU loses to Alabama, I think the Tigers' chances are pretty good then, still, because of the 2 wins against top 10 teams. All right, question 5 in the Tiger Rag Weekly Six-Pack. What is LSU's biggest issue on defense right now?
That's tough. I still think, even though they just had their best week in this regard, I still think it's the pass rush. I think Caleb Von Chason is a guy that can do a lot of damage by himself, but you still want to see them be able to generate pressure with 4 guys a little bit more effective than they've been able to. As Rashard Lawrence and Glenn Logan get healthier, that should help. I also think the innovation this week or recent weeks, but it really kind of shown this week, of more Marcel Brooks, more Justin Thomas. Those guys seem like they really made an impact and it helped get after Kyle Trask, but they're going to have to get home a lot quicker against some of these other teams, especially when they play quarterbacks that don't have a messed up knee. It can move around a little bit better.
Yeah, I think these 2 go hand in hand, but defending the middle of the field still seems to be an issue for these Tigers. It's something that they're going to have to improve, especially tackling in the open field. They got to get better at that. They looked good against Utah State. They faltered a little bit in the first half against Florida. They fixed it, but if they go into games against Alabama or Auburn with defenses struggling like that, it's going to be tough to come out with a win.
Less than a minute here for Tiger Rag Six-Pack question. The last one. Are we headed to another game of the century, November 9th, LSU, Alabama?
I think so. I don't see Alabama losing between now and then. LSU's going to have a really tough game against Auburn at home 2 weeks before that, heading into the bye week. But I think LSU's going to be able to pull that one out, especially after what they showed against Florida. I have high confidence that this game will be 1 versus 2.
I agree, too. I mean, I know it's kind of boring that we agree, but I think LSU showed you enough defensively that they can beat Auburn with a freshman quarterback coming into Tiger Stadium. And offensively, you just don't really see who's slowing them down. It certainly won't be Mississippi State this weekend. I do think both teams are undefeated going into that November 9th showdown.
That's it for the Tiger Rag TV Weekly Six-Pack. When we come back, more of Tiger Rag Television. Stay tuned.
Hello, I'm Jim Inkster, the president of Tiger Rag, and our interview segment this week in our inaugural edition of Tiger Rag Television is none other than Alan David Risher, one of the great quarterbacks in the history of LSU football, and there have been a few. He was LSU starter from 1980 to 82, and in that time he set records that stood for a long time. In those days, passers generally completed less than 50% of their passes. Alan Risher in 3 years completed 62% of his passes. He was a great runner as well, and he played on one of the best teams in LSU history in 1982. The Tigers, the only Tiger team ever to beat Florida, Alabama and Florida State in the same season. And welcome to Tiger Rag TV.
Great to
Alan,
be with you, Jim.
Well, it's good to see you. And we're going to cover some ground here, but let's start with the current quarterback. He's pretty good.
Yeah, he's pretty good. He's probably the leading candidate right now for the Heisman Trophy. If you'd have said that 8-10 months ago, you may have got laughed out of the room. But Joe Burrows playing great football. He making great decisions. You know, quarterbacking is about execution. They put him in this new offense. He's obviously acclimated to it unbelievably. And just like the other night, he's throwing balls in tight windows and doing a great job.
Well, in 6 games, he's got 25 touchdown passes. I looked this up. The guys who preceded you, who are pretty good quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Steve Ensminger, who's now the offensive coordinator, and David Woodley. In 4 years playing together, they had 24 touchdown passes in 4 seasons. The game's changed quite a bit, but obviously Burrow is a cut apart.
He is a cut apart. I mean, I think last year you could see he's a tough guy, but he stepped his game up. You know, you can see him. He's stepping up into the pocket now, Jim. He's climbing the pocket, making great decisions, and making great decisions when to run and when to throw the football. Those are the kind of things that really make an effective quarterback. And he's probably going to have a shot at the next level. Will he be a #1 draft choice? We don't know. Obviously, these next 6 weeks will be the telltale sign of this, but he's going to have a chance to play at the next level.
Well, much is riding on the Alabama game in a few weeks. Probably the division, the conference championship, maybe the national title, and the Heisman Trophy. What about the duel between Joe Burrow and Tua?
It's probably going to decide the Heisman Trophy. I mean, let's face it, I think Tua's got 1 interception. I think he's got 29 touchdown passes. Burrow's got 25 and 3 picks. So if everything goes according to plan, Alabama's schedule is fairly weak. LSU's got to get by Mississippi State and Auburn before the big game. But I tell you, on a national TV, national audience scale, a lot of writers will be looking at this football game, and whoever comes out of that in the best shape, statistically, and your team wins, probably got the inside track to win the Heisman Trophy.
Well, Alabama in the day preceding you and a little bit into your tenure dominated everybody in the conference. In an 11-year period, they lost 4 conference games.
That's pretty strong.
That's pretty strong. 1982, you go to Alabama, and they were a great team that year too. This is Bear Bryant's last season. LSU at that time had only a tie with Tennessee, but you're underdogs at Legion Field, and what happened?
Well, I think it was the first time in 11 years. I mean, they'd beaten us 11 straight times since 1971. So it was the first time that I think the football team and myself didn't feel like we were a touchdown down because Bear Bryant was standing on the other side of the field. We felt like we had a good enough football team to win. So you had a senior quarterback and myself, a lot of seniors on defense, a senior-laden type football team, and for the first time, I think we actually thought we could win, because most of the time you hoped you could win, but you didn't really think you could win the football game.
120-10, and legend has it that Bear Bryant wanted to address the team.
I think Jerry Stovall mentioned to us in the locker room after the game that he wanted to come over and say hello, but that was a little too much for even Jerry to handle, I think. So Bear Bryant didn't come over and address the team after the game. But it was it was probably my best football game as a quarterback, Jim. I mean, I think I was 20 of 26 for about 182 yards. But I didn't turn the football over, made some big scrambles in the game, picked up first downs, kept the momentum on the field, and didn't allow Alabama to get back in the game. It was 17-0 at halftime, and they cut it to 17-10 within minutes into the third quarter. And you could tell that our football team started looking around thinking, here we go again. So we were able to stem the tide, no pun intended, and we wound up winning the game handily.
Well, Alan Risher is from Slidell, Louisiana, the Slidell Slinger. And your center was from Slidell, Mike Gambrell.
That's correct.
And you wore number 7, which of course had been worn by Bertram Hayes Jones, LSU's last All-American quarterback. Any chance at all that you were going to go somewhere else? Because as I recall, you were fairly heavily recruited.
I was heavily recruited. I could have went anywhere in the country to go to school. However, my father was at LSU between 56 and 60 during the heyday of Billy Cannon. I don't remember, but yeah. But you know, they won a lot of football games. My dad was an LSU freak, started taking me to games when I was 3 years old. So I had the goose pimples popping up on my neck and my arms and everything from the time I was 3, 4, 5 years old. I took some recruiting trips at the time. I was a parade All-American high school quarterback, so I just said, you know, I'm going to go see what the world's about. So I went to Tennessee, I went to Florida, I went to Ole Miss, and actually went down to New Orleans and visited Tulane. But at the end of the day, it really wasn't going to be a recruiting war because my dad wasn't going to let me go anywhere but LSU.
Allen comes to LSU, and in 1979, you're on that team, which is one of the most memorable in LSU history. You lost 3 games at home to the 1, 2, and 3 teams. Close games, too, to USC, Florida State, and Alabama. And Alabama won the national title, 3-0. But your first snap as an LSU Tiger was Charlie McClendon's last snap.
We're playing Wake Forest in the Tangerine Bowl in Orlando, and Coach Mack, I guess, maybe looking into the crystal ball of the future, let me get into the ball game and take the last snap of the game against Wake Forest. I was a nervous wreck. I was hoping I wasn't going to drop the snap, Jim, because it would have been ugly on national TV. But we got the snap, handed it off, and the rest is history.
And you took the baton from David Woodley and Steve Insminger and started for 3 years. But before that, Coach Mack is fired. They hire Bo Ryan. You had him as a coach for 42 days, and his plane crashes. We're coming up in a few months on the 40-year anniversary of that. What was that like?
You know, we never met Coach Ryan. I mean, out of courtesy to Coach Mack, he decided he didn't want to address the football team, even for the guys that were actually coming back for the following year, because of the Tangerine Bowl, and it was Mack's, you know, in quote, last hurrah going out the door. And he didn't want to address the team, so it was strange. We never met the man. Really? So 42 days in, you know, we get the news, you know, that the tragic plane crash happens, you know, and so we never met the guy. And then, of course, Jerry Stovall is the head of the varsity club at the time, which would be the equivalent of TAF at this point. He's on campus, and Paul Dietzler goes to him and says, hey, you know, we need you. This is a tough situation, obviously. And Bo Ryan's staff was already in town. They had all signed 2-year contracts, so Jerry inherits guys that he's never met before. So it's an interesting deal. We wound up going 7-4 the first year. People call it a miracle. We were 4-0 in the SEC for a while, thinking, man, we're going to pull this off. But didn't quite happen. We ran into a red elephant and a big bulldog in Jackson, Mississippi.
But Jerry Stovall, he wanted that job and then was told he wouldn't get it, and then this weird set of events happens and he receives the job. And he was wound pretty tight. He was a tough, tough guy, and I think that was evidence in playing for him. He was a challenge, wasn't he?
He was a challenge. I mean, Jerry was a very disciplined guy. That's the way he ran his life, and that's the way he ran the football team, which I had no problem with. I mean, I think, you know, Coach Mack had kind of gotten a little bit lax, let's say, as far as weight room workouts and stringent programs. I mean, we had some guys with some big bellies, you know, and when Jerry came in, he decided that, you know what, we're going to shape this team up. We're going to get more into the 80s here and get this team more in shape. So he took a little bit different approach, a little bit more disciplined. Guys got on board with it after a period of time and obviously wound up having some success. Not many guys have been, National Coach of the Year in 1982, and he's out the door basically a year later.
Less than a year later.
Less than a year later, yeah.
Yeah, but 80's a good year, 81's a bad year. 82's a very good year, and you had Dalton Hilliard and Gary James, and you tore it up. Early in the season, you looked invincible. When did you know you had something special in 1982?
Well, I think after we went to Florida, Florida was ranked 4th in the country. We go to Gainesville, and you know, we handled them pretty easily, 24-13. And I knew at that point in time, Dalton Hilliard became a national figure because the game was televised, I believe, on ESPN, and he played one of his better football games. He caught a screen pass, broke a bunch of tackles, and scored a couple of touchdowns. So it was the introduction of Dalton Hilliard as one of the great running backs in LSU history that day in Gainesville. So I knew at that point in time, with me being a senior quarterback, Mack Brown coming in, implementing an offense similar, well, we won't call it similar, similar in nature as the timing, Joe Brady bringing in this newfangled throwing it all around the yard offense. I mean, we threw it a little bit more, obviously, in 82 than we did in previous years. So it was a little bit of a similar situation. You had a young and upcoming positive guy taking over the reins. Mack Brown was only 31 years old at the time he got hired. So he was a young fella, too. So it all worked out, and, you know, we wound up losing 3 games by a total of 7 points. And what could have been, you know, it could have been an undefeated situation.
Yeah, it's one of the best teams in LSU history, but you went 8-3-1 and lost 21-20 to a great Nebraska team, which finished second in the Orange Bowl. But many people may not realize it, but Alan Risher was briefly, very briefly, a teammate of Coach Ed Orgeron.
Well, we got to, you know, freshmen came in early in 1979, and Ed, I guess, had gone to South Lafourche. And, you know, everybody, all the freshmen were in the same place in the dormitory at the time at Broussard Hall. Ed, I think, was only like 2 doors down across the hall from me, but Ed didn't last too long. You know, Bebe was there probably no more than 4 or 5 days. He packed up and went to the house, you know. And, you know, LSU, you know, look, you're coming from the Bayou or whatever it was. I mean, it was the big city lights, you know, and you had to be ready to take on what the situation offered. And he wound up packing up. So, Jim, if I'd have known that was the pathway to be the head coach at LSU, I'd have bagged it right after he did, but it didn't work out that way.
Yeah, he just, you know, got homesick.
Sure, he got homesick.
That's basically what happened. But when he got the job at Ole Miss, I'm told that most of us didn't know a whole lot about him. And then is that the same guy?
Well, I got to be honest with you. I didn't know Bebe's real name was Ed. I mean, you know, because he wasn't there long enough. I mean, you know, we got introduced to him as Bebe Orgeron. And so we didn't really get a chance to know Ed. And then I remember when he got the job at Ole Miss, and I kept thinking, Ed Orgeron, this sounds familiar. Is that Bebe Orgeron? So, but give Ed, you know, credit. I mean, he's paid his dues. He has traveled the country. He has been with a number of different schools and professional organizations. He has paid his dues. And if you look at Ed Orgeron right now on the sideline, he is a chief executive officer, and he's doing the right things to go out and get guys to help him.
We're visiting with Alan Risher. This is Tiger Rag Television. We're glad you're with us, and we're coming back with more from Alan Risher about what happened then and now. I'm Jim Inkster, the president of Tiger Rag, and we're continuing our interview segment this week with Alan Risher. Many of us remember him as one of LSU's finest quarterbacks. Number 7, 1980 to 1982. He started every game but one during that 3-year period, and he led LSU to an Orange Bowl season in 1982. And the big game that year was against Florida State, 55-21. And the Oranges came down in Tiger Stadium like nobody believed. I remember Jim Henderson getting hit in the face with an orange and getting a black eye. It was quite a night.
It was, you know, going into the ball game, everything was on the line. The Orange Bowl committee had already said whoever wins the game is going to the Orange Bowl, okay? So obviously pressure during the game. It was tight. Florida State had a good team. Obviously Bobby Bowden had done a great job at Florida State. LSU hadn't beaten Florida State since Bobby Bowden had been the coach. So going into the game, obviously it was doubt. They had a great offense. We had a good defense, but the game was tight. And then right before halftime, they fumbled a kickoff. And I checked off to a play to Eric Martin through a post route. He caught it for a touchdown. We went up 28-14. Took the second half kickoff, went 80 yards for a touchdown, and the game kind of got where it was supposed to be, and wound up, you know, rolling them pretty good, 55-21.
55-21. You know those scores like the back of your
I do.
hand. Yeah, I know. I know. But I remember in the press box, people were saying, we didn't know Alan could throw the ball that far.
Well, you know, we got lucky. I had a little scramble play, and we practiced a scramble drill, Jim. A lot of teams at that time didn't do that, but Mac Brown implemented what we call a scramble drill, that if I ever got out of the pocket, the guy on the far side of the field, if it was Eric Martin or Herman Fontenot, or whoever was playing split end or flanker at the time, knew what to do based upon where I was rolling left or right on the scramble. And Martin took off straight down the field like he was supposed to, and I actually just happened to see a gold helmet down there. And I threw it as far as I could. It went between 60, 65 yards in the air, hit him in a dead stride, and it was one of the great plays in LSU history, really. It was a great, great play.
How much has the game changed between then and now?
From 1980 till now, there were times where I threw the ball 10 times a game. I mean, against Kentucky in 1980 in Lexington, I was 2 out of 10 for 17 yards, and we won the game 17-10. So that tells you how much the game has changed, where the pass, the forward pass, when a lot of teams were running the option, the triple option, that kind of thing, it really wasn't a big part of the game. So right now, I mean, you look at 5 wides, Joe Burrows standing back there, empty backfield, and just picking out somebody to throw the football to. Offense has taken over the game. The rules have been conducive now for offenses, and I think it's fun for everybody. I mean, LSU fans have been complaining for years, you know, it's been a boring set of football to watch, and now at least football is entertaining, and it's fun to be out there.
And Alan's career coincided with the genesis of the United States Football League. 1983, the USFL begins. Alan Risher's with the Arizona Wranglers. And you had quite an odyssey in the USFL, but you played pro football then, and it led to a stint in the National Football League.
Well, you know, I made it to the show for a couple of years, but obviously started in the USFL, Jim. You know, I played in the Senior Bowl. I was the South quarterback in the Senior Bowl in January of '83. The NFL scouts weren't real crazy about Risher. He's a skinny guy with not the greatest arm in the world, but I tried to beat him with my mind, as you know. And when the USFL rolled around, this is a true story. I didn't even know I got drafted. I picked up the Morning Advocate the next morning and said, well, the Arizona Wranglers draft Alan Risher in the 15th round. Well, Harry Humes, who had been a vice president with the Saints for years, was the president of the Arizona Wranglers, and he had hired a former Saint assistant, Doug Shively, to be the head coach. Harry liked me, and that's why they drafted me. And gave me a nice signing bonus, reasonable salary, and went out there and wound up making a little 2.5-year stint in the USFL and propelled me a little bit to get a couple years in the show.
You got to see Bobby Hebert play in that league,
I
too.
sure did. We played against each other. The Michigan Panthers, they got off to a shaky start, went out and got a few ex-Pittsburgh Steelers during the course of the season, and they wound up winning the whole shooting match. So it was an interesting 3-year period there.
Now, during that period, you're probably thinking, I want to get into the National Football League, but you're doing well enough in the USFL. And there's a guy who owns the New Jersey Generals named Donald John Trump, and he had visions of moving his team into the NFL. It kind of gummed up the works, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Trump wasn't the original owner of the New Jersey Generals. He took it over after the '83 season, and of course, knowing Donald Trump as we do today as president, I mean, nothing but the best is what he's going to strive for. And he felt at that point in time that the NFL had a monopoly on fall football, the antitrust laws were in place, and he decided they were going to file suit, and he got the other owners on board that they were going to try to move the USFL from spring to fall football and compete against the NFL. Well, that was a mistake. They actually won the court decision, but the joke was they won $1 and they never got any money, and then the league folded after the '85 season.
But it was Trump who pushed for this to happen.
No doubt.
You might have played a long time.
Well, you never know. I mean, you know, we can always look in the rearview mirror. It propelled me at least to have an opportunity in the NFL. It's all about who you know, not what you can do or what you think you might do. Doug Shively became the defensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers under Lehman Bennett. They needed a backup quarterback, and lo and behold, he gave me a nice recommendation, let's say. So I went down to Tampa, won the backup job, and of course, we had some other things happen. Steve Young's under contract with the Bucs. And anyway, it's a long story, but Risher's odd man out, and I'm out the league in '86.
But then there's a strike in '87, and you get a call from the Green Bay Packers, and before Aaron Rodgers, before Brett Favre, there was Alan Risher.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Tom Bratz was the GM in Green Bay, who was actually in Atlanta a couple years before that when I decided to go to Tampa. Well, I took the wrong fork in the road at that point in time. But anyway, he's in Green Bay now. And the strike happens, and I'm sitting at home in Slidell, to be quite frank with you, and the phone rings and says, hey, man, you want to come up and do these strike games? I said, send me a plane ticket, man. And I'd paid my NFL union dues previously. You know, I was a union member, but 99.9% of the guys in my shoes, Jim, would cross the picket line to go have an opportunity to continue their career, and that's exactly what I did.
Well, you did, and then you played in '87, and you moved on with your life. You've done very well in business, but many think you should have been a coach.
Well, you know, I did get into coaching. I started coaching arena football back in 2001, 2002. I got into coaching. I enjoyed it. But at the time, my family was still young, and, you know, I would have had to have moved to the Northeast or do something. I had a couple of connections in college football, and I probably should have went in that direction. But, man, there's so many considerations. These coaches are working long hours, and like Ed Orgeron, he's moved around the country. And I just didn't think my family was suitable to do that at the time, so I've been a resident of Baton Rouge now for 31 years, since 1988.
We've got about 20 seconds, but as we look ahead to LSU, Alabama, in your heart, you probably think one thing. In your mind, who wins this game this year?
Well, I think LSU's got to score. We've averaged 9 points a game the last 9 meetings against Alabama. Obviously, we're not going to win many games averaging 9 points. LSU's going to score this time. I don't think Alabama's good on defense. I think we're going to win a close one and break the spell.
After losing 8 in a row. But this man broke the spell when LSU had lost 11 in a row. And at 58, he looks like he could still play. So
yeah, I don't know about that. Maybe right guard at this point in time.
Well, Alan Risher, thank you.
Jim, it's been a privilege, and I've always admired your shows, and you do a great job. Thanks.
And we'll return with more Tiger Rag Television after this brief timeout.
Back on Tiger Rag Television, Jeff Palermo along with Tiger Rag editor James Moran and assistant editor Tyler Nunez. Let's take a look at Saturday's slate of games. First of all, with a non-SEC game, Penn State a 9-point favorite over Michigan at Happy Valley. What do you think, guys?
It's nice to go outside the SEC when the SEC slate leaves a little something to be desired from a gambling standpoint. But I'm taking Penn State here. I'm laying the points. I've watched this Michigan team a good bit, and frankly, I don't like them. They're not very good. Shea Patterson has been kind of one of the biggest disappointments in college football this year. It's going to be a packed house, raucous environment in Happy Valley. Not quite Death Valley, but still a pretty intimidating place to play. I'm going to take Penn State, lay the 9, and that'll be my first pick.
Yeah, I'm not touching Michigan with a 10-foot pole this season. They almost lost to Army. They struggled against Illinois this past week. I got to take Penn State in this game. They're a really solid, complete football team. I got to give them the points.
You would think eventually Michigan has to come up and bite somebody that they're not expected to beat, but I don't think it's going to happen this Saturday. All right, back to the SEC. South Carolina, the huge upset in Athens. Now South Carolina goes home, and they will host number 9 Florida. The Gators are a 7.5-point favorite.
Yeah, I'm taking the Gators here. I think South Carolina is going to be a little bit hungover. I think Florida is going to be a little bit angry, and I just got to think that that's going to lead to a big Florida win.
I'm going to go the opposite way on this. I'm going to take the points with the Gamecocks. I like what their defense has been doing lately. I think they've kind of found something here with their third quarterback, as strange as that is to see. And I actually think it's going to be Florida that comes into this game with the hangover, knowing they probably let an opportunity get away when considering they were up 28-21 and then go on to lose by 14 points at LSU. I think they're the team that kind of has the hangover in this game.
All right, now to Tuscaloosa. Alabama, a 35-point favorite over Tennessee. For some reason, the league insists that this game has to be played every year. Alabama has won 12 in a row. Again, the Crimson Tide, a 5-touchdown favorite.
I'm actually going to probably be shocking here. I'm going to take Tennessee with the points. I mean, Alabama, they're really good, obviously. They roll everybody they play more or less, but they haven't really been covering these huge spreads, and the reason why, I think, is because they have so many injuries that when they go to their backups, normally their backups are good enough to stop a team like Tennessee. This year they really haven't been. I mean, they had backdoor covers with South Carolina, with Ole Miss, and so I'm just going to take the points. Seems like a huge line against a Tennessee team that is, I hesitate to say this, but playing a little bit better lately.
They're playing a little bit better. They're coming off a big win, but I'm still going to take Alabama in this game. I think Alabama is just so much better. I think they're going to run away with this game early and often. Even with Tua out in the second half, I still think they're going to be scoring. I just don't see a way that Tennessee covers here.
All right, to LSU and Mississippi State. Tigers went to Starkville. It was all Bulldogs, 37-7. LSU is a 19.5-point favorite this time around.
I'm going to take LSU here. They're coming off a big win. They have all the momentum. I just think that LSU's on such a roll. Joe Burrows and this offense are just steamrolling through everyone. I think it's going to be a big win for the Tigers.
The logic in the world says LSU. They're scoring over 50 points a game. Mississippi State's got a true freshman quarterback. Their defense is really struggling. They're coming off a disastrous loss to Tennessee. But all of that is why I'm going to take the points. I'm going to take Mississippi State. For LSU, it's the classic trap game, right? You're just coming off a huge win against Florida. You got another huge game next week in Auburn. I think LSU wins pretty comfortably, but I wouldn't be shocked if there's a few nervous moments and they only win by, let's say, 17. I would take the points. I love a good trap game.
I think a good backdoor cover here, right? Mississippi State maybe scores a late touchdown in the fourth quarter and gets it within 17, something like that. It could possibly happen. All right, that's a look at our picks for this week. When we come back, more Tiger Rag Television.
Looking for fun in Baton Rouge? At Celebrity Theaters, you will experience the highest quality of family entertainment in the Baton Rouge area. Come experience luxury recliner seating in 10 auditoriums, including the 2 premium large format auditoriums with Dolby Atmos sound for every huge movie release. Plus, enjoy a full arcade. Celebrity Theaters is located at 15365 George O'Neill Road in Baton Rouge with locations in Broussard and Ruston, Louisiana. Tickets can be purchased in advance and your next event can be scheduled at celebritytheaters.com. Come join us at Celebrity Theaters for family fun and create lifelong memories.
For 25 years, Alzheimer's Services of the Capital Area has held the Walk Run to Remember, raising awareness and funds to locally serve those affected by Alzheimer's disease and other memory-related impairments in the greater Baton Rouge area.
Join us on October 19th at LSU's Old Front 9 for the 25th Walk Run to Remember. Help us raise awareness and funds to support families affected by dementia here in our community.
For the latest in LSU sports, in-depth game analysis, interviews, and all things Tiger Nation, listen to Tiger Rag Radio. Visit TigerRag.com for stations in your area. Tiger Rag Radio.
Thank you for joining us here at Tiger Rag Television. I'm Chelsea Brumfield. LSU goes head-to-head with Mississippi State on the road this weekend, and Auburn coming to Tiger Stadium next weekend for a big matchup that you don't want to miss. We'll be here with everything you need to know about LSU sports and more. After all, we are the Bible of LSU sports. We'll be here same time, same place next week. You don't want to miss it.